Lamiante! First podcast of May. Last Thursday, I took a break because even it was International Labor Day. In the United States, Labor Day is the first Monday of September, but I decided I needed to take a break to breathe for a while. We have been doing this for over 2 months in English. And Miante, I'm doing this podcast in French and in English for two reasons. Because I believe that it is essential to tell my stories to as many people as possible and to make sure that people understand what I'm talking about. This is not just to mourn my father. This is not just to force you to pity me and to just say, oh my God, what a sad story. This is to um, try to direct your attention to an injustice that is ongoing, to what is happening to this African legend, to his succession, and to me, his disabled daughter. So, Miante, I doing this podcast not only to say that Fotso matters. Fotso matters. When I say Fotso, I don't just talk about Fotso Victor, my dad. I talk about me. And another thing that I'm trying to say is that disability matters. You know, Miante, disability is one of those sensitive subject that it is very, very, very hard to talk about well, especially when you're the one that it is touching, especially when you are the subject. Because, Miante, the temptation here is always to make you an object. You can't be a subject. It is very, very difficult when you are um, a black woman, a woman of color, an African woman, a woman who is originally from Africa, from Cameroon, to talk about disability. Because, first, people feel uncomfortable. The fact that they feel uncomfortable make you uneasy, so you don't know how to talk about it because you wonder, do I have to talk about something that makes other people uncomfortable, that they have a hard time to relate? So you hesitate. You try to counter the issue. You try to talk about everything else, hoping that people keep in mind that you're disabled. Keep in mind that at the heart of this story, there is disability. Um, I have a leg that has been deformed since I was 1 month old, and it made it impossible for me to walk. I walked until I was like 9, but then the gap between the two became too, it was impossible. So I started to walk with crutches. The advice of the doctors at the time were my parents to amputate my leg because both of my parents could not really agree. They were already divorced. So it was very, very trouble. It was very, very hard. At the end of it, you know, they just left it like that. So it was only when I turned, 30 that I was able to basically take care of it. Very, very long story. We'll have many opportunities to talk about it, to, make episode on this podcast on this issue. But here in Yende, what I want to say about that is that, yeah, at the heart of my story, of my dad's story, there's this disability. That's my disability, but there's also his because he couldn't read and he couldn't write. So that is a disability, in my opinion. It wasn't even imaginable when my dad was born around 1926 that he could become that rich, that an African, that a Cameroonian, that a person from the western region of Cameroon could become that rich. But he became that rich. And he does it. He can't read French. He can't write French. And he understands it just barely. He's very, very good at counting. he can count. And he's very, very good at reading people. That's how he makes his fortune. That's how he becomes a captain of industries in Africa, one of the first ones. But the more successful he becomes, the more that fact that he can't read and that he can't write becomes a disability. It explains in huge part what happens next. And my disability also explain what is happening currently. When I got to the US, I went to this school that still exists. It's in upstate New York. That was my first private school, my first private school. It was the master school in the upstate New York. And even though my dad had paid for the whole year at once, they had a dilemma. It was the 90s. How do we deal with her disability? And they decided, because I was a black child, because I was an African child, to basically deal with it like, okay, she'll just have to ask for help when she needs it. But that's kind of what the slogan disability matters is trying to correct. If you put everything on the disabled person, especially when it's a black child, especially when it's an African child, to ask for help, then you're not solving the issue. You're making the disability, the child problem, the person problems. And I'm talking about that, Miente, to make the point that that is what has been happening to me all my life. 90% of it is about that. In my life, too many people have tried everything that they could to make the point that in my case, disability doesn't matter. For my family, they would say, oh, it's her attitude. She's mean. She's an evil person, spoiled, all type of things that they usually say about the disabled. For people at the school I went to would have been that, oh, she's uppity. She thinks she's smart. She's a know-it-all. It was always something. Then when I went to college, it was, oh yeah, but she has, she obviously has money, so it doesn't matter in her case. Remember, my first year in college, I get to North Carolina. A lady from the International Student Office picks me up at the airport, and she realizes how disabled I am, Miende. She realizes how disabled I am. And she's like, oh my God. It didn't even occur to me when I was applying for college to talk about my disability. I didn't talk about it in my essay. I didn't even mention it because for me, it didn't matter. I wasn't really disabled. Nobody told me that it mattered. People, on the contrary, had made me believe all my life that it was my problem. I needed to deal with it. My dad had money, so it doesn't matter. So I get to North Carolina, first year in college, and this lady, she comes to pick me up at the airport, and she goes, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? All the freshmen are, have to live in the high rise. How are you going to manage that? Now we have to find a way to put you somewhere else." So we get to the room where I'm assigned, and she's like, "You can't. What if there's a fire? What are you going to do, when, and then she realizes that apartments, where they were putting upper level students, it was so far away from the campus. And she goes, "You don't have a car. How are you going to manage it?" But, Yante, it was too late. The college I wanted to go to was in California. And my dad was like, "No, you're not going to California." So I chose, North Carolina, the University of North Carolina. It was my plan B. So I just checked how good the classes were. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go there. It's going to be fine. I can manage that. So I get there, and this lady says to me, "There's so many problems. How are you going to manage that?" And Miente, I managed it. I managed it because I had no choice. You couldn't say disability matters. The one thing that the University of North Carolina did was to give me the advantage of choosing my courses, my classes at the same time as upper level students. You who go to college in America know that it's a huge advantage because it makes it possible for you to finish early. And me and Day, I finished early because I went to summer school throughout, my college years. But when it came to talking about the realities of disability, tough luck. There was nothing that could be done. I remember, Miente, after my freshman year in college, I needed to move my stuff to go to the dorm where I was going to stay for the summer. And because nobody had been willing to help me, I basically hired movers. And they come with this huge truck. And they realized that I just had 4 bags. That I just had 4 bags to move. And all that was needed for somebody to move the 4 bags, it wasn't even 500 meters. So basically I hired professional movers to move my stuff my first year. And when after summer school, when I left, I think I went to New York, and I came back, and the people from the staff from the University of North Carolina had to move my stuff back to my to the apartment when I was living. And the lady, my advisor, says to me, the next time we do that, you're gonna have to pay us. We're not here to move your stuff. Find people to do that. So stuff like that. But again, Miente, this is America. I said, I always say that one of the reasons I made it in America, when I was able to go to college to become a lawyer, to get to, law school, to do the bar, to do my master's in international relations, to get to the UN, is because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which changed the way people view it. Yes, people could always try to ignore disability in my case, but it wasn't always possible. So, Miente, for me, I get to the US in 1993, and with this disability matters mindset, I forget that I come from Cameroon, that I come from a continent where disability is a burden. Disability is an impediment. You know, being the daughter of a woman who was one of the wives of the most, one of the wealthiest men in Cameroon and in Africa, I was a problem. And I was going to remain a problem no matter what I did. I had this sense, Miente, had this idealistic notion when I was a child that by being smart, by going to school, by becoming a lawyer, by being a writer, by being bright, by being the best at whatever I chose to do, that it was going to resolve the issue. But it never did, and it couldn't, because it's the context. Even the brightest I was, the more diplomas I got, the most successful I became at school, writing, whatever else. It made the fact that I was disabled even a bigger issue because people were seeing it and people were asking more questions. And that to the woman who gave birth to me was a problem. So, me and Dave, with this podcast, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's not always easy, it's not sexy uh, to make episode after episode talking about disability. And that's not the goal, but the point. What I'm asking you to keep in mind is those two things. When you hear me talk about my biography, when you hear me talk about Fotso Victor's biography, keep that in mind. Keep in mind what you face when you're disabled and you're an African and you're Black and you come from a continent that has been brutalized for years, a continent where if you are from there, you can't have any weakness because the first people who look at you funny, to put it simply, are the people from there because Africa, given its history, given its realities, is a very Hobbesian continent where might makes right most of the time. Tell me if you disagree, but I think Africa, African societies for the most part are very Hobbesian. And when you have a weakness, a disability is considered to be a weakness, it's very, very difficult for um, feel any type of compassion to get even past the idea what is needed here is compassion. They have a trouble just even considering what that means for you because to them it's a waste of time. You're wasting time. Life is already very, very hard. Why should people pay attention to your struggles when life is a struggle for everybody? So it's your problem. If you want to be a part of society, you have to deal with your own shit. Disability is a shit that the disabled has to deal with. One of the most popular insults in Francophone Africa is to say to the disabled, aie pitié de toi-même. You take pity upon yourself. Say that you're wasting time, whatever. Deal with that. And imagine when you're the disabled child of a wealthy person, how much shit you get. For my dad, whatever he was doing for me, it was a problem. Oh, she got too much. Oh my God. There's no use. She's disabled already. Why does she even want to be normal? It's a waste of time. She's a woman anyway. Whatever, whatever, whatever. Even for the woman who gave birth to me, she felt that any attention placed on me was a problem. I was already very stubborn, and she felt, oh my God, um, she's a burden for me, and she's not even grateful that I am even able to love her. The woman who the woman who gave birth to me, since I've been, this young, used to say to me, you should be grateful that I even love you. Nobody else can. Disability, here it explains the story. It explains, how all this predation was able to happen to one of the wealthiest person that Africa has ever produced. And why? His disabled daughter was able to become a lawyer and a writer in America, has to deal with all kind of shit from all over the place, from America, from Switzerland, from Cameroon, from France, just because she's refusing to accept that this story is banal. Let's move on, And I'm saying, no, we're not going to move on. Fotso matters. Disability matters. The story here is worth telling. If this had happened to a white guy, if I were white, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Le Monde, the Times of London, the Guardian, the Atlantic, even Jeune Afrique would be talking about this story ad nauseum because the level of predation here was just unbelievable. people just went at it, thinking that nothing is going to happen. Disabled African folks. Fotso Victor is disabled and old and dying. He died. His daughter, yeah. We took the money. What is she going to do? So let's just crush her. And nobody is going to care. And again, Miente, to conclude this episode, my bet is that I can make you care. Is that by telling the story well, I can make you care. I can make you curious. And I can make you outraged enough to start. Yes, we're going to use the Ali Bongo and popular saying, make noise. So, Miente, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Please share it. And you can write to me, contact at Fotso, my last name, .org, or, and, Miente, please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. See you Thursday, guys, for another episode.